Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Welcome to another episode of Ethical Perspectives in the News. I am your host, Karl Cassell, and today I have some guests on the show with me to discuss an exciting and an uncharted topic and territory right now. Despite the fact that people think the Metaverse will be here one day, we can honestly say it's already arrived and unfolding before our very eyes. Similar to the internet in the late 90s and early 2000s, we are at the very beginning of this new technology. And so with that, we have with us Nate Houstman of Xiphos Web Marketing, owner. Good morning.
Hi. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we have Linn Tabak, professor of computer science at Cornell College. Good morning.
Thanks for having me, Karl. Looking forward to the discussion.
Welcome. Absolutely. And lastly, John Schnipkoweit, who is a senior VP of engineering at Outside IO. How are you today?
Good to be here, Karl, and looking forward to the chat with Nate and Leon.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right into it. And who wants to kind of explain best you could what is the Metaverse and how will this Metaverse be accessed?
So if you will, I'll begin here. In 1990, Bill Gates, the leader of Microsoft, commissioned actors to act out some vignettes in which he described what he thought would be the future of computing technology. And this is a video that I showed to my students. Now, last year, Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, made a similar video with actors again, acting out what he sees as the future of the internet. Some of what Bill Gates predicted 32 years ago came true, but he missed big pieces as well. And when we look at Mark Zuckerberg's vision of how we will use the internet more fully, how the experience will feel more real to us, how we will feel more there, it will feel less alien to talk and communicate with people through the internet. No doubt some of this is on the mark and some of this will prove to be an incorrect prediction, I think.
Yeah, just before recording, I kind of mentioned a lot of what we're seeing in the so-called Metaverse seems to be like what we saw in 90s sci-fi, just like people hooking up the brains, just putting on a pair of VR goggles and just living in a virtual world and just interacting with each other online. Now, is that going to come to pass? It may or may not. The Metaverse kind of sounds like a buzzword to me. I think it's just the natural evolution of the internet and just the World Wide Web, just bringing more, computing power and technology and just more social interaction into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nate, you're probably hitting on something there. I think, if we look at even like social media when it came out, like nobody really. It was kind of like you kind of poke fun at it a little bit, where it was like, okay, like who really needs to know like what I'm having for breakfast, right? Like on Twitter and like some of the random things that it was used for. I think even when the iPhone came out, it was kind of another wave of like, do we really need this? There wasn't a killer app, right? And I think the same thing applies here. Metaverse, to me, I look at a lot of like what we're experiencing over the last few years is really this next evolution of the web or the Web3. If you want to look at it that way, I think a lot of people are getting hung up on the technology aspects of like what that means, but which I can talk to. But it is obviously like this at the core of it, it is about decentralizing ownership of the internet, which I think is like really interesting and actually possible with like, the way that finance and things are really baked into protocols, which we've never experienced before.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Bitcoin just kind of like made decentralization and blockchain mainstream. Like Bitcoin, originated like 13 years ago, but it's just now really coming into the content by Bitcoin and blockchain technology. And really I think what the discussion and the debate's going to be centered around is centralized control versus decentralized breaking up of power and even ownership. So, I mean, one of the problems that people like maybe Bitcoin aficionados and maybe even gold bugs, people who like are big into like gold and silver, one of the problems they have with like maybe the Federal Reserve or the government is a lot of power is controlled by a single organization. Even are they even elected? That's the question. Blockchain basically breaks up that power. There's no single person or organization that controls Bitcoin. The software that it runs on devices all around the world, so that makes it censorship resistant, and that technology can be applied to like a lot of different apps. Like there's the Ethereum blockchain platform, which has its own cryptocurrency, but that's meant to be like a platform that you can build decentralized software applications on. So
yeah, that really is like kind of the yet to be. I don't think we have the killer apps. I think we've seen, back to the point on the virtual worlds and things of the metaverse, like we don't. That is the exciting part and also the challenging part. I think I think this wave has moved. Having been through the last, the first kind of Web 1, Web 2 waves, this one's definitely moving the fastest that I've seen, which is exciting. But it's also like it draws a lot of criticism for that, because you see a lot of like of the trial and error, right? It's like and you see a lot of the like way social media has connected our feedback loops today.
Yeah.
There's a lot more heat about NFTs being just JPEGs or pictures that you can just copy than I think there was about like, well, why would I need this email thing?
I think I've made a few memes myself about NFTs, and I think the technology is promising. I just don't think we're maybe 3, 5, 10 years we'll actually have some solid use cases for it. But right now, people are just still getting used to it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the work we're doing, I think, is really, I think we're pushing the envelope there. And just so people are familiar, like at Outside, we understand the metaverse is happening. So Outside, we're, our flagship product is our magazine, which has been around for 30 plus years, and we own probably 25 to 30 other publications, some of them dating 50 years. Ski Magazine, Backpacker, Climbing. So we have this rich media business. And when we're thinking about technology and how we grow our business, one of the things that I think it is really problematic is the screen time, right? And that's what we've really dubbed the outerverse, right? And how can we leverage, NFTs? So, this idea of having a distributed, really an NFT is a distributed program. How can we do that to validate, that people are getting outside and then reward them, right? So, that's something that we've been working with our partners with. And I would say that, it is early days for that. But at the same time, we're following a lot of like patterns that I think have become commonplace in tech, which I'm not going to go into too deep, but like edge computing, right? This idea of like having programs run at the edge is very similar. In fact, we can write it in the same language as we write NFT smart contracts. We can write it in Rust. So we're feeling really good about where we're at. We just launched kind of like our Outside.io project, and we've gotten really great creators signed on board. And our next 12 months are really about, it's a playground of like pushing the limits of what we can do with NFTs. So that's a little bit about what we're doing.
Leon, you were about to say something. Jump in.
Well, I think the promoters of this, the people who are talking the most about the metaverse, have another concern I'd like to hear the other panelists address, and that is the development of some kind of standards that would allow whatever technology develops to be widely used and not limited to one company, to one vendor. The development of standards is an important part of engineering. It's not a glamorous part. It's not a part that gets the same attention from the public. But some kind of connectivity, some kind of shared understanding of how we're going to use these new digital resources is going to be important. It's not just going to be one company.
Yeah, it can't be one company or organization, but I think it's gonna have to be like a social kind of like communications issue, just getting people to like come on board with one standard or another. I mean, and just making sure that no one has any underhanded or ulterior motives with their standard. Just something that most people can agree on.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting. There's kind of three prongs to Web3, right? When we started talking about the tech, and Metaverse is kind of like potentially an application that sits on top of it, just like we're promoting Outerverse, right? The three prongs that I think blockchain really has enabled through the evolution, right? We've come a long ways on some of them, and it's still early days. It's a really fascinating space to be in. But one of them, which we were just talking a little bit about, is NFTs, right? And this is really the ability to run code across the entire chain. The idea that you can have a code that a script of code that no longer you have to have a server and pay for that server and maintain that server over the years. And this creates this interesting, trustless, immutable supercomputer, right? This new computer that literally it's pretty impossible to turn it off. Versus well, if I don't pay my Amazon bill as the founder of a company, all of a sudden the app that I built stops working, right? So that's an interesting piece of it. The second piece, I think, which is what we're just talking about there, are really DAOs, right? This idea of having decentralized autonomous organizations. And DAOs can go one of two ways. I think the positive way I'll take is I've seen a lot of people. I've kind of over the years I've become this student of organizational design, and I really enjoy helping people work together and how do we organize to really find each other's energy and really maximize that. And I think there are a lot of people in the org design space that are really starting to help the DAO community, because that is where that governance potentially can happen for these standards that you're asking about. And we're seeing that at the chain level, right? Like the layer ones, right? And that's not always gone smoothly. There's a lot of people probably don't know about Ethereum's big fork back in 2017 when the DAO went horribly wrong. But guess what? It's still here and it's still running. So even when things go horribly wrong, that's pretty cool. And then the third prong, which we may or may not talk a little bit about, is the DeFi aspect, the actual ability to have this ledger of value. And so those three things combined is really what makes up Web3. And I think when you start talking about Metaverse, you do have the incumbents, right? I mean, there's only a couple tech companies in the world that control most of the bandwidth and data, and obviously that's why Facebook's involved, right? They want to continually, have a closed kind of system, but the rest of, I'd say, Web3 is very much driven on open source and open standards. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's important to really define DAOs, because it's potentially it can potentially replace corporations. DAOs are basically protocols that are operated, and maybe you could correct me on this if you know better, but a DAO is basically a program with a set of rules that can govern an organization on the computer, and the human members of a DAO can vote on the direction of the organization based on those rules and have a stake in it. But there's no CEO in the corner office or levels of other executives. It's it's potentially grassroots control of an organization.
It's definitely I would say what it probably is the most common structure of a DAO to date. I think the nice part about a DAO is that it's flexible, but it does create this immutable record of decision making because it's using the blockchain. And so yes, it does enable you to have the kind of the headless organization you described. But it also allows you to create, your own rules, right? Because basically, like these are distributed contracts. So you can very much mirror the same structure as an LLC or a C corp or whatever you would like organizationally. Because I think you can see how, there are definitely things like if you have 10,000 people in a DAO, there are definitely things you probably just, in theory, it's, everybody gets a vote. In practice, 10,000 votes is
it's kind of like, corporations today, like how many shares of the company do you own? And that's going to tell you how many votes you have in the decision making, if any. So
totally.
Go ahead, Linn.
So in the beginning, the internet, of course, was an experimental medium for academics. It was built on a basis of trust. Nobody was thinking about commerce. Nobody was thinking about privacy, safety, security. So I wonder how the rest of you think those problems might be addressed in coming years. Privacy, safety, security, better forms of commerce in the electronic media. What do you think?
And before you guys answer that, I want to piggyback on that because that's where I was going to ask my question. Because we have governments across the world, China, the U.S. has talked about it with their Federal Reserve, central bank digital currencies. So at some level, they are looking at getting into this Web3 space and trying to set standards. Will that hinder this process, or will and they'll bring in their regulations and whatever rules of engagement they think are beneficial or ideal for their countries, or will it spur this decentralized process on a little bit more?
Well, are you ready to jump down the New World Order rabbit hole? World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, Great Reset rabbit hole? Because central bank digital currencies, they sound like, on the surface, they sound like digital currencies like Bitcoin, but the keyword is central. These would be centrally controlled. This would be centrally controlled money by some bureaucrat in the government or the Federal Reserve or the central bank, and that's, just think, if we've seen, earlier this year we had the trucker protest. We saw the trucker protests in Canada. They were protesting against mandatory COVID vaccines. Whatever you think about the vaccine, is kind of beside the point. They didn't want to be forced to make a move on something that was still considered experimental. The government of Canada and working with the banks in that country shut down a lot of the bank accounts of the protesters and even people who may have donated or supported the protesters. Imagine if the government could decide, okay, we're just going to shut off your money. We're just going to shut off your ability to earn a living or buy certain things. That's the danger of a central bank digital currency. Whatever your politics are, if the governing authority doesn't like your politics, that's a very dangerous idea. It's like, I don't want to be a
and to your point, Nate, and to your point, those truckers were now having Bitcoin sent to them. Once their bank accounts were shut down, now they were getting cryptocurrencies. To your point, I'm sorry, I just wanted to jump in.
No, that's a good point. And you might have heard of the farmers in the Netherlands protesting their government, and the orders that have come on high to cut down their production, reduce their livestock. They're putting their money into Bitcoin. They're investing in that. So that's another use case of a decentralized sound money system.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I would say out of the three prongs of Web3, the idea, I think there's DeFi kind of breaks down into digital currency, but then also the ability to reflect value or move value around. I would say it's the least convincing part of Web3 to me in the act of digital currency. I think we are always going to have, unless there's some massive, change, which could happen. But I would say the chances are unlikely. We will still have, centrally governed currencies, much like we will still have centrally organized businesses. Like, I don't think those are going away. I think a good example of this is like even right now, back to your question, Leon, on privacy and security. I mean, this is something that we take a paramount, like, care with. There's a lot of challenges with Web3, just in like the onboarding of getting a wallet and participating. Like it's convoluted today, and it actually does open up people to like, the full elements of Web3, whether they realize it or not. And that means that like everything you do is on chain, right? So here's a good example. Like, would I like my company to pay me in a digital currency on the blockchain? I don't know. I don't really want my salary and all that stuff out on a public blockchain. So that's a good example of like, like that's probably something that's not going to go away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to security and privacy concerns, our goal is just to how do we leverage this technology to bring, the next, I think we have like, somewhere between 70 to 100 million people engage with our content or our apps throughout the year, right? And, some of these are, we own Gaia GPS, which is a hiking app. We own, Trailforks, which is a mountain biking app. And obviously that's location data, and it's super sensitive and not something we're going to put on the public chain. But we can still work as a centralized company to enable like really cool things with rewarding people for getting outside by really putting this into a permissioned environment. And if somebody does want to take that outside of our ecosystem, potentially, to the public chain to, I think the goal here is we are going to be building open standards. So like somebody else could come along with a hiking app and they want to import all those hiking routes into their app. Like we're actually building in the way that you can do that, but we're going to make sure that the user understands, but by transferring it out, they're now potentially like there's location data there. I think those problems on a broader scale there will be privacy and security solutions for the blockchain, much like we've seen with SSL and other things for the public internet, for the internet we all use today. It's just going to take a while. So back to Nate's point earlier, like I think that is like a 3 to 5 year timeline. We've seen some like very early day privacy control things in Web3, but it's like, it's going to take a while. So that's why we're taking this kind of Web 2.5 approach and really helping by providing a lot of that privacy and security that people expect and the user experience, but by starting to leverage some of the standards of Web3.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of trust, and the developers of any like Web3 app, whether it's public or private information, they're gonna have to like convince the customer or the end user, and show them your data is safe with this app, or we'll only share this data with your permission. So it's not just a technology question; it's a matter of social trust and psychology.
Well, and regulations too. I think a lot of companies balked at GDPR and CCPA and all the privacy regulations coming down the pipe. They're all great, actually. I mean, like, yes, they cause more headaches and more challenges for engineers, because it's like now all of a sudden you've got to think about backing data out if somebody wants to be deleted. But if you think about the fact that like we're a rather large company in this space, like we've calculated, we've taken that into consideration, and we're going to be following all the privacy regulations, which does make us, there's limitations to that, right? Like we can't just go full Web3, right? Because of it's just not there yet. So
people are not opposed to change, but they just want to ease into it and do it gradually.
Well, I am most eager to see how these technologies will change my work in education. I recently spoke to another person who's head of engineering at another company. He told me a candidate had applied for work, and why are you leaving the other company? Because they wouldn't let me learn a new JavaScript library. That was kind of the end of the interview. They wouldn't let you learn. Learning is easier than ever before. It's all free. It's all out there. And I wonder about, I see great potential, and I see a little bit to worry about there too. Schools have to adapt, and we have to learn how to use this new technology most effectively.
Yeah, and so we have 5 minutes left. I want to maybe touch on what's going to get people into a blockchain. So gaming is becoming very popular. There'll be immersive, immersive environments, and people will buy things using cryptos. How soon do you think it will be I know you guys talked about 3 to 5 years, but with gaming increasing the way it is, especially amongst young people, my son, 13-year-old, will that be the kind of the on-ramp for the larger part of humanity, for lack of a better word?
Well, Carl, people are going to use these technologies and they're not going to know they're using these technologies. If you ask anybody on the street, what is public key encryption? They have no idea. It's one of the biggest inventions of the last 50 years, and it's everywhere, but nobody knows it. Right?
Yeah. When's the last time somebody said, I downloaded this cool app because it runs on Amazon Web Services? Like nope, nobody really does that. I don't know.
Sure,
it's on the internet.
Yeah.
Right.
UI, user interface is everything, really.
Yeah, I mean, gaming's obviously like an interesting example, Carl, to your question. I think there is this like kind of like concept you hear about people being able to like bring items from one game to another, which is totally possible with like NFTs, and like there's some some environments out there that let you do that today. I think that requires a lot of like change to the gaming industry. I think digital goods is like a huge thing for the gaming industry, and they don't need blockchain to do it. They're already making tons of money off of it, which is like, we saw the first kind of wave of that with Farmville, right? It's like, people bought a lot of digital goods inside of Farmville to keep their farms going, and that's changed the model, which actually kept that industry alive and made it thrive. I think the interesting things are the new kind of ways we're seeing game mechanics applied with this. And so there's a couple out there, like Sweatcoin is one. So Sweatcoin has had just meteoric, like just huge growth. And what it is it's basically like, it's a simple like step counter on your phone that rewards you with using like, these sweat coins, right? And the sweat coins are, you can exchange them for like Amazon gift cards and like actual real things. And then another one, is kind of like very similar to that, where there's like a move to earn. There's a lot of move to earn type of things in the kind of like what we can do here, because you can validate the actual activity on chain. And so I think we're going to see new models like that come about.
Yeah.
Well,
we got 2 minutes left. We need to wrap up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Even though this was titled the Metaverse, I wanted it to be about blockchain, to be about cryptos. And we covered all of that as quickly as we possibly could in 30 minutes. And so I thank you guys for taking the time to kind of unwrap this. And again, public, this is for you. It's here. It's not someday. And so more to come. Good day.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks,
nice
Karl.
to meet you all.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It was great conversation.
Good talking to you.